If you're watching this right now and you haven't hit the like button, Billy, get on it. Bug your brother. Tell him to do the same.
We are so pleased to be joined by today's guest, host and producer on Sportsnet, The Fan 590. Most of you know him from Jays Talk, Sho Alli. Welcome to the walk-off, buddy. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for inviting me. I know we had some technical difficulties last time, boys, so I appreciate you bearing with me and not like I imagined after last time you were like Adam was like, "You're banned, Sho, you're banned." So no, thank you for inviting me back.
Yeah, Scott really went to bat for you. So
yeah, I really did. I had to fight for this.
Right.
Now the silky smooth voice is coming through on while you're in your booth there. So again, thanks so much, man. And I know we talked about this last time, but I'm gonna bring it up again because no one heard it. I love Jays Talk. I love how you work the phones and the text line and how interactive you are with all of the listeners. Very entertaining stuff. So well done there, my man.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's fun for Jays Talk specifically, and Blair says this all the time, that it's your show. It's like the people's show kind of thing. And I totally 1000% agree. It's like not really my show or Julia's show or Ben's show or whomever. It's really like the listener show. So I try and get as much interaction as humanly possible every single time, whether it's on the text line or whether it's a phone calls, or sometimes people DM me. I try to read the DMs, right? If it's not like too crass. So yeah, the nice thing about the text line and tweets is that you can like self-edit as you go. So that's always nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we get a ton of interaction too. And it's funny with the mailbag sometimes how divided the fan base can be on a topic. Like it is wild to get somebody who is just like, you guys are idiots. There's no way this can happen. And then the next comment be like, you guys are idiots. There's no way this doesn't happen. And it's like, sorry for riding the fence, but both. So I am in Pennsylvania right now. I have seen the last 4 games live. Absolutely love PNC Park. It is incredible. Pittsburgh is a gem that no one talks about. The people are incredible. The city is incredible. They're warm and they're welcoming. And then my wife and I made the trek to Philadelphia for last night's game. And buddy, day and night, Citizens Bank Park, like I just don't have the vocabulary to describe the hostility that was there. Like we were literally, I was telling Adam before we let you into the Zoom here, we literally had people coming up to us, making eye contact and booing us to our face. Like I was just like, and then there was a point in the game, I think it was the 7th, where the lower bowl started to do the wave. And it was hot dog night. So for $1, you could buy a projectile for throwing. And that's exactly what they did. And man, it just rained down hot dogs, Philly fans on Philly fan violence. Like I was just like, this is such a different feel. What's the most hostile sports event you've ever been to?
That's a great question. First of all, I actually couldn't tell what they were throwing in the lower bowl last night. So it's good. I'm glad you gave me the intel on that. Because I'm like, what? Like they're throwing something. Like I wasn't sure what it was.
It was the hot dogs wrapped in the foil, right? So they were like a little tiny football and people were just...
That is incredible. You know, it's funny. I like this, not the answer to your question, but I did go to an Eagles game once. And like, I guess like in Philly, the entrance to basically all of the sports venues are like right next to one another. Like, so Citizens Bank Park is there, Lincoln Financial. I forget what the name of the 76ers place is, but they're all like pretty much right next to one another. And I did go to an Eagles game a number of years ago before they won the Super Bowl. And it was like right before the playoffs started. And boy, they lost a game very narrowly. And like, holy smokes, people. So you know what? I totally get it. Not here to crap on Philly fans, but I totally 100% get it. I think for me, actually, the most hostile experience I've ever been to was I'd gone to a Bills game with some of my pals, and because I live in Toronto, and of course the Buffalo is just like an hour or so south of Toronto. It wasn't a super long drive, so we drove down to the Ralph to watch the Bills play the Saints, I believe. And I'm not a Saints fan, but my pals are both Saints fans, so they had like an extra jersey. So I wore like a Drew Brees jersey, and they wore like a Deuce McAllister jersey or something. And so we go down to the stadium, and I mean, there's no real rivalry between the Bills and the Saints, like really at all. And like, holy smokes, people will like, kind of like you, Scott, people come up with right to my face and be like, go die. And I'm like, oh, good heavens. Like, this is intense. I didn't realize Bills fans hated Drew Brees and company so much.
Yeah, it was comical at a point. Like when Bo hit his home run last night, I stood up just out of sheer, like just that's what I do when I celebrate a home run, right? And as I'm standing and I'm like, yes, people are like, go back to Canada. And I was like, I should have stayed seated. Like,
that's so good.
All right, Sho, let's get into it here. Let's talk John Schneider a little bit. And I have been a defender of him over his tenure as the manager. I do like the guy. I'll be honest, though, the last couple weeks, there's just been some decisions that have been head scratchers. Hindsight's 2020, and you can always rip apart a manager's decisions. It doesn't matter how good manager of the year, the fan base will rip them apart. But last night, after getting 4 big outs, Trevor Richards gets trotted back out there. I'm aware they don't have a long man right now, and I know that Mitch White would solve this problem, which is also a weird thing to say. But, it just felt weird to put him back out there knowing Richards' limitations. Then to put in a very sick George Springer for Varsho, who has been great. Danny Jansen pinch hitting. There were just some decisions where I was like, I don't understand what's going on. Is he overthinking it? Is he overmanaging? Like, where are you at on John Schneider?
I'm with you. I'm a big fan of Schneider, kind of like on the whole. I'm also with you in that I didn't love a lot of the decisions we saw in Game 1 against the Phillies and that in the short 2-gamer here. But I feel like it's rare that when a manager puts in, like a manager makes a million decisions over the course of a ball game from before the game even starts when it comes to changing the starting order, the batting order, whatever, who you get the ball goes from the hand of the starter to reliever X, Y, or Z to the hand of the closer. Like there's any number of decisions you make along the way from before the game starts right to the end. It's rare that every decision you make in a single game does not work out, which is I feel like what we saw last night. Like sometimes you'll see like one decision not go someone's way, but a couple other decisions do go his way. And I think you're right. Like virtually, unfortunately, every single decision culminated in something not going the Blue Jays' way, whether it was leaving Trevor Richards in too long, not bringing Swanson in soon enough, for example, even though he'd been warming for quite some time, it would seem. Maybe leaving Pearson out there, or maybe even putting him into super high leverage situations
high leverage
to begin with. Yeah. And then the one I took exception with the most, because bullpen usage can be a little iffy. And Trevor Richards, I mean, there was that one inning where he looked nasty. Like he got some of the most dangerous batters in the Philly lineup. So I admit I did question why he didn't come out earlier, but that's not the one I had the most quibbles with. It was the George Springer pinch hitting for Dalton Varsho with the bases loaded. Not because Varsho, not even because Springer is the guy you could bring in, but Springer came to the plate and he looked visibly sick, right? Like he clearly was not 100% healthy. If this was healthy George Springer, or let's say he had gotten injured and the injury was like his foot was sore or something, and he just had to stand at the plate to swing, then I'd be like, okay, yeah, like I can live with that. But seeing Springer come up and he looked like he was trying to keep his lunch down, basically, and it's like that's the guy you want to bring up. Like I'm a huge, massive fan of George Springer, but like if he was sick enough to not start the game, he was probably sick enough to stay on the bench. And it's not like you're pinch hitting for like Kevin Biggio here. You're pinch hitting for Dalton Varsho of all people.
That's exactly what I was just going to say too. It's not like it was Espinal at the back of the lineup there where I would have been all right with that. George Springer listen, he's been unlucky, but it's not like he's super hot right now either. Right. I would almost give him a pass if Springer was so hot. It's funny because we were sitting, my wife and I were sitting in the right field bleachers in Pittsburgh, and buddy, he was like, you could visibly see he was sick. Like he was wiping his nose, he was coughing between the plays. He was literally squatted down with his butt on the ground and his knees up, just like, I was just like, I kept saying, I'm like, he's not playing in Philly. Like, this is insane. He's even out there right now. So to see him be pitch hit there, I have to agree with you there. When it comes to John Schneider, I know that he's only been the manager, not even a full year. Unless I always feel like experience is acquired, it's not given. Do you think that much like a player acquires experience and becomes better, that the same thing applies to the manager, and that hopefully decisions like this, even though, yes, we're all pulling our hair out now in May, does come back and benefit us in September and October?
I do think that. I really do think there's definitely like a bit of a learning process or a learning curve when it comes to basically anyone in any sport, right? Like you look at some of the newer head coaches in a bunch of other teams, whether even if you want to look outside of Major League Baseball, you look at other coaches that maybe brought something new, and then after a certain point, their voices needed to be replaced as well, right? I mean, I think I draw the parallel sometimes with John Schneider to a certain degree, and it could, because you can only do this to a certain degree, obviously, but with like Nick Nurse, for example, with the Toronto Raptors, because Nick Nurse, for example, he was a much respected assistant to Dwayne Casey. They fire Casey after he won Coach of the Year, and then they bring in Nurse, and then they make all these trades. They bring in Kawhi Leonard, they ditch DeMar DeRozan, and then all of a sudden the team goes out and wins a championship. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly like an apples to apples comparison with getting rid of Charlie Montoyo and promoting the bench coach John Schneider to the manager position, but at the same time, I do think there is a certain aspect of Schneider gets a bit of a time to put his own stamp on things, gets his own time to learn, and then we'll see what their club thinks of him, right? He clearly had some kind of existing prior relationship with a lot of the stars, whether it's Vladdy or Bo or some of these guys when he was with the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. So I think I'm willing to give him, maybe a couple more seasons, because the other half of it too is like even the most successful managers probably will get replaced at some point, right? Like the most successful managers in Major League Baseball right now are guys that have either already won the World Series, so they kind of have a bit of cachet, or they're guys who their squads are going to like the AL or NLCS every other season. And we already know what the variance is like in those spots anyways, right? So I feel like the shelf life for a major league manager, if everything goes perfectly, is still only like what? Maybe like 7 to 8 years max, probably, right?
And that's insane. Like, exactly. Yeah. Like you look at Kevin Cash and you're like, man, that guy, I don't know how he's doing it.
Voodoo. That's how the Rays are doing it. Voodoo.
That's the whole Rays system.
Here's one thing with John Schneider. Like you said, the good decisions, bad decisions, it's a little bit of a coin toss almost, right? Like sometimes they go your way, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you look like a doofus, sometimes you look like a genius. He's not losing the locker room. It's not Oliver Marmol. This is not a dysfunctional team. So this, when we want to complain about John Schneider, it could be a lot worse, right?
Oh, Adam, can you imagine if we were having a conversation? I mean, I think, again, this is a terrible comparison, but let's just say they were like, Alejandro Kirk's going to be the fourth outfielder, and we're not going to have him catch anymore. And you're like, oh, that makes no sense, actually. That makes not even a lick of sense. That's exactly what's going on, or very close to what's going on with Wilson.
And he's finding out about it at the same time as all of you.
It's truly wild. Like I feel like the Cardinals are playing the Cubs the other day, and in Wrigley, I believe. And so it was Contreras' return to the team he obviously played for and the confines he was familiar with. It was just kind of hilarious because I think he hit a home run or a very long double, and he was getting the boos. He was kind of like, yeah, give me the boos. And it was a rare situation where it was like the existing team, the existing front office, the old team, the old front office, and the old fans all hated this guy at the same time. So I don't know what's going on there. So you're right. Adam is totally right. It could always be a million times worse. And honestly, I would still frankly put John Schneider as young, quote unquote, as he is in a managerial position. I would still honestly put him in like the upper half of Major League Baseball, because like the team is a pretty good team. It's up and down, but they've played a million road games and they're still in the upper half of a division where basically everyone has won 20 games. Like that's insane, right?
I think he does have a good team, and I feel like I could probably manage this team to above 500, right? Like, but I think it's good that he hasn't sunk he's good, and he just hasn't sunk the ship, and I mean that in a good way. I know obvious. That sounds like such a negative Nancy. I don't mean it like that. I mean it in a positive, but it's obvious, reassuring way.
Yeah, like
it is possible to sink a really talented team. Look at the White Sox.
Right. It's obvious this team has a genuine love for their manager, and that cannot be said across Major League Baseball. So there's that.
Yeah. Well,
Okay,
you mentioned the
Sho.
White Sox, right? Adam mentioned the White Sox, and like Charlie Montoya is the bench coach for the White Sox now. And did you guys see that report about how like Luis Robert apparently didn't even know his name? Which I saw that and I thought to myself, is this a joke or is this just how he is, like how Luis Robert is? So it's true, like there are genuinely some really dysfunctional relationships where I'm sure the locker room does not respect or the clubhouse doesn't respect the manager. And I genuinely don't think that's the case for John Schneider. I do think he gets a lot of leash from the players, the front office. And I think it's also important to note, as far as decision-making goes, I do genuinely also wonder how much of a manager's decision-making, even in the moment, is made by he himself versus like a choir of voices, including like the high performance department, as Barker likes to call them, the khakis, I wonder.
Totally.
Okay, so we are now going to talk about something that, Sho, you are already, I'm sure, sick of talking about, but Alec Manoa continues to struggle. And listen, before I get to the question, I'm aware it's not like there's a bunch of options in AAA currently. However, it's hard not to compare his immediate success with the immediate success that we saw from another beloved Jays pitcher in Roy Halladay. Yeah. And Roy did get a little messed up with his delivery. He was struggling, and he was sent back down to AAA after already dominating for a period in the big leagues. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily the way that should be, the route that should be taken, but is that the route that should be taken?
Boy, I mean, like, if you had asked me this question like 2 weeks ago, I probably would have said, no way, no chance, right?
Because no way I would have asked this question 2 weeks ago.
and 2 weeks ago, we had that start where he played the Yankees and he effectively dominated the Yankees in New York again. So yeah, I kind of thought maybe he was turning a little bit of a corner, but the walks over 9 are some of the worst in the American League, if not the rest of Major League Baseball. And the slider, which was the nastiest pitch maybe any Blue Jays pitcher threw last year, apart from Kevin Gausman's splitter, like that was one of the nastiest pitches you'd see. And maybe it's his worst pitch. It's actually kind of wild how much that's changed. So honestly, I do kind of wonder, especially after the first game in Philly, I do kind of wonder if maybe he is dealing with some kind of injury. And I think the thing that strikes me the most is Alec Manoa has always been, and I mean, always is kind of a relative term because his career is so relatively short, all things considered, because he hasn't been in the majors for that long. But going back to his debut in 2021, Alec Manoa has always been the kind of pitcher who's been very deliberate on the mound, right? He's on the mound. Even if he makes a bad pitch, he kind of stares out, then he deliberately lifts his arm up with the ball in his hand. And all those things are very, very, very methodical, perhaps. He's not a fast-paced guy on the mound. And now you have this pitch clock to contend with. And I'm not blaming the pitch clock, but I do kind of wonder when it comes to the pitch clock, it's helping some guys out. And I'll die on the hill that it's helping Yusei Kikuchi out 10 out of 10 times. But I do kind of wonder if it is hurting Alec Manoa just in the way he prepares and like mentally sorts through things on the mound. And it could also be a number of things. It could also just be maybe there's a physical injury as well, whatever it might be. But like it's shocking that you would go from someone who is an AL Cy Young contender to like one of the worst starters of any team in the American League. And there was probably some regression bound to come, like there always is for everyone, but good heavens, I did not expect it to be like this.
It's been weird to watch him on the mound too, because he just doesn't look comfortable. He's mulling around. He's constantly kicking at the front of the mound. He, like you said, he's pulling his slider nonstop. And again, it's not like there's options. Zach Thompson has not looked good in AAA. I mean, the option is Casey Lawrence. So how long do you wish to roll with that? But is Casey Lawrence at this point, if you can get Alec Manoa right by sending him down for a couple of weeks, like, how would you feel personally if you saw that happen if he comes out next start and he has another one like last night, and they bring him down to AAA, and they're very supportive of him in doing so, and they're like, obviously he's our guy, would you, Sho Alli, be all right with that move?
I feel like I probably would be, if only because because we were talking about Schneider earlier. Schneider and the rest of the staff, Ross Atkins, none of them would ever say, "Oh yeah, he sucks. We're sending him down because he sucks." Or they'd say rightly that we're sending him down because he needs to get right. He's just working on some things. It's not going so well for him so far. He knows what he has to do. Like, I was listening to the post game availability, and like it was a very short post-game availability with Alec Manoa. It was like less than 2 minutes he spoke to the media. I think he answered 4 questions, and he basically said, "Yeah, I'm battling out there. I'm working through it. I gotta be better. I can't control what the other batters do when I'm throwing pitches. I can only do my best." So it certainly sounds like he is extremely frustrated with his own results. And I think, like, since all of the really great quotes, like the pressure is something you let out of your tires, for example, like those are money quotes. But at the same time, yeah, if he is struggling on the field, then yeah, if the news came out in like a week and a half or 2 weeks that he was getting sent down after a homestand to Buffalo just to get right, I would honestly almost breathe a sigh of relief. The other half of it obviously is, who do you bring up if that's the case? Like you mentioned, Casey Lawrence. Like, is it Thomas Hatch? Do you just make Mitch White give him 2 starts if he's back from his rehab stint and say, "Hey, good luck, Mitch. Like, once Manoa comes back, you're going to go back to the pen." I have a feeling though they're probably going to let Manoa work through it. I do kind of wonder also, guys, how much of it is tied, and I'm just speculating here, but I do kind of wonder how much of it is tied to maybe, let's say, the return of Hyunjin Ryu. Like, if this thing continues throughout, let's say, to the All-Star break, and I mean, that's a lot of starts between now and the All-Star break for him to continue scuffling. But let's say we get to the All-Star break and Ryu is ready to come back and Manoa is still scuffling. I wonder if that's conversation they have and reset the rotation a little bit that way by including Ryu, and maybe it's a 6-man rotation. Maybe Manoa is taken out and he gets to start skipped here and there. I do wonder if that's part of it going forward.
So Ryu has always been a guy who relies on deception. He's not a velo dude. He is 35 years old and he is coming off Tommy John surgery. How comfortable are you relying on Hyunjin Ryu come July of this season?
That'd be like it's a tough sell. Don't get me wrong. It's a tough sell, especially when you have such high aspirations for the club. I mean, Gausman has pitched extremely well outside of maybe effectively 2 innings. He has pitched extremely well, right? The first inning in Houston, the first inning in Boston, or maybe the second inning in Boston, let's call it. And then Bassett, ever since his first start, he has been getting, I would say, for the most part, progressively better and better. And the last outing the other day against Pittsburgh was pretty great. 7 innings, no runs. So I'll take that. And then Jose Barrios and Yusei Kikuchi have shown some definitely more positive signs about turning things around, especially Kikuchi, which has been extremely welcoming, I will say. But if you're replacing Manoa with Hyunjin Ryu, and you mentioned all those things about his career to date, he also just has a whack of innings logged on that arm of his. Like, even before he was in Major League Baseball, right? He'd had a lot of innings logged on that arm. So
great point.
It's true that it would be a little, I don't know if like concerning is the right word, but I don't know if you want to necessarily just throw Ryu into the fire of being a starter every 5 days. But I do think when he is ready to contribute again, which from the sounds of it will likely be after the All-Star break and not before, if that is the case, then there's no way it can't help the starting rotation, especially if the bullpen continues to, I don't want to say like scuffle necessarily, but they've been a little overworked as of late, especially in starts where guys don't go quite as deep. And the Pittsburgh series was a nice a balm, perhaps,
reprieve. Yes.
yeah. It was quite nice, but this is not going to happen all season. So I do kind of wonder if Ryu's presence and also Mitch White's presence might be able to maybe ease some of the tension elsewhere for the pitching staff.
So we'll take a positive spin here because we have been pretty negative. So every Friday on the show, we do a segment called 3 Studs and a Dud, where Adam kind of does his research and highlights the 3 guys on the Jays who are really contributing. And I don't think there has been a week since we've done this where Bo Bichette isn't one of the studs, or at least an honorable mention. I know it's early May. How long do we need to wait as a fan base before we start chanting MVP when he comes to the plate?
Oh, good heavens! I almost feel like we should be there already to a certain
Right?
degree,
Okay.
right? Like
Okay.
I'm always kind of like afraid to say stuff like that because I have no problem with saying giving takes, but sometimes I know as someone like born and raised in Toronto, I can fall victim to being a massive homer sometimes. But honestly, like there are few players from a position player standpoint who have been as consistent here through the early May as Bo Bichette has been in the entire American League. Like literally apart from, I would say, Shohei Ohtani, I struggle to think of another player who has been, maybe Mike Trout. I guess Mike Trout. And even he has fallen off to a certain degree. But apart from the literal two best players in the world, the next best guy is Bo Bichette. So yeah, I fully support the MVP chance whenever Bo comes to the plate. The guy is an absolute terror, a nightmare for opposing pitchers. He very rarely goes down easy in plate appearances and ABs, right? He makes it difficult all the time. And the base running looks a little bit more improved. And you know what? Honestly, the thing I've looked forward to the most this year was the defense. The defense being improved. And like early on in the year, there were a couple of flubs. And I think based on how last season ended, it added to the chorus of, oh, Bo is not a major league shortstop. Yeah. And you know what? In the last maybe
month,
3 weeks to a month. Yeah. Like I don't think we have talked about Bo's defense at all. And that is wonderful. I am so happy to not have to take phone calls about should we have to move Bo Bichette to second base because because the thing is about Bo is, and you guys know this, and everyone knows this, he's so offensively talented. And even if he is a league average defensive shortstop, he's one of the best players in Major League Baseball. That's just the fact, I think.
That was my bold prediction in the offseason. I was like, Bo Bichette will be a league average shortstop defensively. And after that first week, people were sure ready to shovel my words right back into my mouth. But it is such a relief to see him not being talked about. And that's all you can ask out of your defenders, right? Is that they're not making glaring mistakes and airmailing balls into the fans. Like,
well, if Bo is a league average defender, right? Like if you think about, it's kind of tough to do this like on the fly, but if you think about the best shortstops in Major League Baseball, not even just in the American League, just in the entirety of Major League Baseball, if he is a league average shortstop and he continues putting up these kinds of numbers or anything remotely similar to it, and you look at the other guys, Trey Turner is playing in this exact series with the Phillies. He is one of the few shortstops that I think people like the name comes to mind when you think of, who are the best shortstops in Major League Baseball? Xander Bogaerts probably up there. Wander Franco's probably up there. You know, there are a lot of other guys up there. And when you combine talent to age as well, and what the ceiling could necessarily be, even I might even take Bo over a guy like Trey Turner. Wander Franco is a very interesting comparison because he's super young as well. So maybe he is the only other guy you can maybe make that comparison to. But like the guys like Turner and Bogaerts and Carlos Correa and so on, like their age and injuries and production are it's all great production wise. But I think I don't think it's a homer take to say I might take Bo over most of those guys.
I feel the same way.
Speaking of taking Bo over someone, God forbid we get to this point. 3 years from now, we have a tough choice on our hands. Not we, but Atkins and the Blue Jays brass. They only have it in them for one mega deal. Bo or Vlad, who is more vital to this team's success long term?
Or do you just go with whoever says yes?
You might have to, definitely. Yeah, you know it's funny, every time
you put one deal on the table and you say first one to sign it gets it.
yes. Here are your pens. It's like that scene in The Dark Knight where the Joker snaps the broom in half and he throws them to them and say, all right, good luck, boys. It's like that with pens and Ross Atkins. No, I am looking forward to seeing what happens with the contract situation. I just feel like, and again, this could be just maybe adhering too much to what has happened in the past, but shortstop is a more valuable position than first base, unfortunately, right? That's it. And Vladdy is probably never going to be a real terror on the base paths, even if he is incredibly aggressive. Like that's not really a part of his game. His game is having incredible plate discipline and seeing the ball extremely well at the plate and hitting for power to basically every part of the field, which is something, all those things together are things that very few few individual players, I suppose, can do. I'm sure many people could do some of those things well, but Vladdy's one of those guys who can do all of it. It's incredible to watch. I also enjoy whenever he hits a home run and he turns to the camera, he does like the money sign, which is phenomenal because he knows he knows what he wants and he knows the front office is listening to him. Having said that, I do think that like if the number there that Vladdy is looking for starts with like a 3, let's say, right, when it comes to the new deal, then I have a feeling there might be a longer contract negotiation versus whatever number Bo might want, because shortstop is just a more valuable position. And I think there's also just more, we mentioned Trey Turner and Carlos Correa and some of these guys. Wander Franco's already signed a massive deal. Xander Bogaerts just signed a massive deal with Turner this past offseason. So, and like we were talking about, those guys are older. So I got to think that Bo is probably looking at that and saying, boy, I'm going to be a rich man. I'm going to be able to buy my own baseball team once it's all said and done.
One thing I do want to kind of give credit to this front office for is buying out his RBers, because we watched having that little extra thing for him to think about. We watched him turn down his raise 2 years ago because he didn't like the way that the Blue Jays brass evaluated raises, right? So he just was like, nope, I don't even want it. And then he kind of struggled out of the gate, made things kind of weird. I mean, obviously September, we all know what happens, and he found it. And no one really had doubt that Bo Bichette was going to eventually find it. But just removing that element from his thought process, like, kudos to them.
Yeah, hey, 100%. And I think too, I think the thing that impressed me the most about the arbitration discussions, negotiations, let's call them, I think is that you hear so much from other players over the years that, because what you're doing in arbitration is I'm saying, I think I'm worth this much. And then you as a team, you're going to come to me and say, no, actually, here are all the things you did wrong. I think you're worth less than that. And we've heard over the years that arbitration can be a bit of an ugly process. Like, I think it was Corbin Burns who won the Cy Young not that long ago, basically
was blamed for them not making the playoffs.
And which is frankly insane considering how good of a player Corbin Burns is. And then he went to the media and basically says, yeah, you know what? My relationship with the team is not the same as it was. Like, it is damaged because they said all these things about me that I felt were untrue. And yeah, we settled it in the end, but like, I don't view them in the same way. And so that's why I think really, and I'm totally with you, Scott, like, kudos to Ross Atkins and the front office for going out there and saying, you know what, we want to avoid this process. We want to make this a priority because we know not only paying him whatever Bo wants, and he obviously knows what he's worth. He's the son of a major league ball player. So he obviously knows what he should be getting. But at the same time, he also wants to feel valued by the team. Like I would imagine the three of us want to feel valued by all of our various employers, right? And the people who sign our checks. So he got that from the Blue Jays, and I do think it bodes well for contract negotiations down the road. Like, who knows how it goes exactly, but that they did go and the extra yard to make sure he was signed for at least these RBers. I think it does bode well for me.
So we touched on it earlier. The bullpen continues to be a point of contention amongst the fan base anyways. I mean, the circle of trust has quickly become, it feels like, a dot of trust outside of Romano. I mean, Swanson's been good. Mays has been good. No one has been lights out. Is panicking about the bullpen in May premature? Like, as long as this bullpen doesn't cost them to the point of not being in the playoffs, is this something that maybe is being blown out of proportion and come the trade deadline can be solved?
I think maybe to a degree, yes. Like, I think there is something to worry about with some guys to a degree, right? I mean, like, Jimmy Garcia was so good last year. He was amazing last year. Probably the number
reliable, 2.
Yeah, exactly. Like, after Jordan Romano, he was their most reliable reliever. And this year he is maybe one of their least reliable relievers. So I have a feeling we might not see Jimmy Garcia in as high leverage situations as we had become accustomed to seeing, and which is a shame because he's another guy who's pitching for a contract. He's going to be free agent at the end of the year, so he wants to make a bit of dough as well. So he has to turn it around. You mentioned Meza and Swanson pitching well, but it's true. If you look year over year, let's just take Swanson out of it for a second, just because he wasn't on the team last year, right? So it's kind of hard to make that comparison with the Mariners, but you take him out of the conversation just for half a second. Apart from Meza, there's probably no one who is pitching exactly the same in the bullpen as they were last year. Richards is probably pitching better this year than he pitched last year. But apart from Richards, everyone else to a certain degree, even Jordan Romano, frankly, I think to a certain degree, has taken like a half step back, even if he is very, very, very good. Maybe a bit of we talked about the slider with Alec Manoa. Maybe he might be a little over-reliant on that slider as well to a certain degree. But for a guy who can throw 100 at the very least, right? So I think it's true. I do think the bullpen concerns are a teensy bit overblown because maybe things get a little bit right as we go forward, but that doesn't mean that's not the top item on the Blue Jays shopping list. Let's put it that way. Because if you look at the rest of the roster, like, I don't know, I guess you could get another power bat in there. It doesn't really matter to me if it's a lefty or not at this point. You could probably add somewhere in the mix if you really wanted to. There's probably no starting rotation additions coming, right? So if you're talking about big changes, I got to think it is someone for the bullpen, whether it's I'm just going to throw out a couple names, like whether it's like a Kyle Finnegan or a Diaz, an Alexis Diaz, whether it's a Daniel Bard or a Josh Stomont, any of these guys. Like those are a lot of guys from teams that might be available that you could probably add that would help to reshuffle things. But I mean, even Jimmy Garcia recapturing like half of the form from last year might do wonders for the bullpen as well, which is crazy to say.
Man, what's been so concerning is you look at this bullpen last year and the guys that I had the most trust in, the guys that were the high leverage dudes, Anthony Bass and Jimmy Garcia, buddy, they're mop-up dudes now.
Yeah.
And it's a little disconcerting. I'm not panicking, but when you start to go down we're going to take Swanson and put him back in the mix now.
Right.
Outside, I mean, Swanson, I might have the most faith in, even above Romano. I'm not saying that he should be closing instead of Romano, but I'm just saying right now, as it stands, and I still trust in Romano, but like you said, probably a half step back from what he was doing last year. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Is there anyone you've got your eye on? I mean, Nate Pearson, obviously, given his first taste of high leverage, and it didn't go as well as we'd hoped. That doesn't mean that he won't put it together. I mean, his first real stint as a high leverage guy in the big leagues. Is there anyone in the minor league system with the Bisons right now you've kind of got your eye on as somebody who could maybe help this team?
I was looking forward to seeing what Adrian Hernandez had, just because apparently he had that nasty screwball people were saying. And then we saw him pretty often in spring training and he got hammered. Like he got hammered early and often in spring training. So that kind of put an end to the Adrian Hernandez train for me. Like obviously I would love to say Ricky Tiedemann, but I don't think Tiedemann is going to pitch for the Blue Jays this year. And that was before the bicep injury, right? And now he has this bicep like soreness, tenderness, and inflammation. So I have a feeling that's probably set him back a little bit. And again, he was probably not. He already was like his whole thing was that he just had not been built up enough to be a starter or to even be added to the bullpen here. So I kind of wonder if that's taken a backseat for now. The only other guy I think I'm really looking, I guess two guys. The other two guys I'm looking forward to seeing were Yasser Zulueta and Hayden Younger. And I don't think Hayden Younger's, I don't think he's as close as we think. So he might be a little further out. But Yasser Zulueta is an older guy, right? I think he might actually be 25 or maybe 26 even. But
he's 25,
So because he's 25, then I got to think his presence on the active roster will, like, it almost has to happen effectively at some point this season. Like, not because of the age thing, just because of, like, how often do you see guys older than that make their debuts? Probably not. Like, it happens every now and again for other teams, but for the Blue Jays, they tend to promote these guys. So I think he is probably the one I wouldn't mind seeing as an internal reinforcement. I think he seems the most likely. And if he comes, and even if he's providing 2 innings of length here and there, that probably would do pretty pretty well for guys like Jimmy Garcia, Swanson. You're hoping Simber comes back off the IL, and maybe it was a blip early on in the season. And Simber, the other thing with him is he's also never been like he's not really like the fireman. You know what I mean? Like he's not the guy where when there's a guy on third and there's one out, Simber is probably not the guy I'm bringing in, only because his pitching style is very conducive to, like, the guy will probably score more often than not because Simber is terrible, but it's just he puts a lot of balls on the ground, and if one squeaks by, then the guy scores, right? But a clean innings, Simber is my guy. He's been very reliable in that sense, but he's still on the IL, so we have to see what he looks like when he comes back.
Sho, at what point is Santiago Espinal's $160 he hitting a problem?
Boy, I think it's a problem now, right? I think we might already be at that point. It's unfortunate, right? Because Espinal, like, remember at the beginning of last year, and he was like he was just hitting the snot out of the ball and talking about how like the barrel rate was up and the exit velo was up and all the important numbers were up, and he was making great defensive plays as well this year. And yes, he was there were some injuries that you add into the equation as well, but I think we are seeing the true Espinal, or at the very least closer to it, in the sense of he is a utility man and not an everyday second baseman. Luckily for the Blue Jays, they do have an everyday second baseman, and his name is Whit Merrifield. But you're right. I think Espinal's role is likely that of the backup shortstop, backup second baseman, and not an everyday player. Unfortunately, despite the fact that I really do think, and I think every fan base does this, they like pick a guy who is like has some like grit and sandpaper to them to a certain degree, and everyone picks someone who they really like. Like it's almost like by definition you can't pick the stars, so you can't pick a Bo Bichette or a Vladdy or an Alec Manoa, for example. And Santiago Espinal has fit that bill, I think, for the Blue Jays the last couple of seasons. Unfortunately, probably not this year. I'm not sure who that guy is this year, but I don't think it's Espinal.
I don't think it's Kevin Biggio.
No, it's not.
I'm gonna jump. I want to jump in here actually while we're talking Espinal, and you mentioned Whit Merrifield. We have a question from the Patreon that I want to get to. So Bradley says he was listening to Blair and Barker the other day and was shocked to hear that Barker had suggested the Blue Jays should consider picking up the Whit Merrifield option for next year. So $6.7 million is what he's getting this year. The mutual option is for $18 million. That sure seems steep, and I don't think anybody last year. I think we just assumed that was a non-starter. What are your thoughts on the Blue Jays picking up Whit Merrifield's $18 million option for next year? And what would he need to do this season to make that happen as a 35-year-old?
As a 35-year-old, I do think, because there are no real, real consistent perhaps options that you can bring up and just be like, just to slot right in as the everyday second baseman. I think as it stands right now at the beginning of May, I think I probably, if Whit Merrifield continues playing the way he has been, I think I would probably have them pick up that option, if only because we were talking about some of the guys down in the minor league system. I mean, I suppose the only two
we
guys
could use another year, right, of development there.
That's what it is. I think, like, if you're, I'm not saying you have to necessarily go out and sign Merrifield to like an $18 to $20 million a year deal for the next couple of years, because he will be an older guy by the time such a deal is done. But if it's just 1 year, I think I would do it. And then at the end of the following year, you hope that, and maybe he has or has not been traded by this point, but you hope that Aurelvis Martinez can be your everyday second baseman, or that Addison Barger is a guy who can be an infielder in some way. Because the other half of it too is, who the heck knows what happens with Matt Chapman in the offseason? Like I would like to think that Matt Chapman is going to sign a long-term deal with the Blue Jays, and it might be a teensy bit more money than you're comfortable with, because he's been playing so well, but he's also a Scott Boras client. And as we all know, the Scott Boras clients tend to not re-sign until they have tested all the available options. So I have a feeling Matt Chapman, like one way or another, is testing free agency. Even if he does eventually come back, I have a feeling he is testing free agency. But because there's like, the infield is so certain right now, and then all of a sudden you're going to go into an off season where if you don't pick up this option, it's very uncertain, right? Then all of a sudden you have
night
holes at
sweats.
second. Oh my goodness. I don't want to see the days of like balls from the left side of the diamond going to first and you're thinking, oh, who's throwing this? Like it's such an adventure so many of the time. So I think I would rather have the certainty, pick up the option from Merrifield and only have to deal with Matt Chapman's free agency saga versus having to deal with both second and third next year.
Fair enough.
So last week, this was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. And it actually did wound up getting talked about on Blair and Barker. So we were at least with the experts on something, which is nice for a change, right? But Spencer Horwitz has been incredible in AAA so far. He's got an on-base percentage of just under 500 at this point, with well over 100 plate appearances. He's a lefty, and yes, the lefties in this lineup have improved substantially in the last 10 days, especially Varsho and Belt, which is really nice to see. Nathan Lucas is just sitting on this bench show. He's not being given an opportunity to play. He's not contributing in any substantial way. Do you think there's a point where this team might try and catch lightning in a bottle with Spencer Horwitz and maybe do the old flipperoo, Lucas having options and maybe seeing what Horwitz can deliver?
You know, I it's not a terrible idea, right? The only problem with it is that I think this ball club does, like, they are married a little bit to the guys they like believe in, essentially. That's not to say they don't believe in Spencer Horwitz, obviously, right? But like Nathan Lucas was the guy who got to, and of course he's been sent down a couple times and come back up, but he was the guy who broke camp with the Blue Jays. And so they clearly believed in him. Like, they believed in Lucas more than they believed in, let's say, Otto Lopez, which I was genuinely surprised by. Like, I honestly thought Otto Lopez was going to be the guy who broke camp over any of the pitcher prospects, for example, and even over Lucas and Horwitz and
just his WBC performance, right?
I honestly thought the Otto Lopez WBC before the WBC actually started, I thought the WBC would hurt him because he was away from the team. And then I don't know if I'd go so far as to say he raked, because I don't know if anyone necessarily on Team Canada raked in their couple of games. But at the same time, he was probably one of their more consistent position players. Not
a healthy contributor, if you will.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like more than like Freddie. Like, I mean, Freddie Freeman and Tyler O'Neill and some of these other guys who are obviously like stars in Major League Baseball or close to it with Tyler O'Neill. Obviously, they're the guys you're looking at, but Otto Lopez did enough that I thought he would make the roster, and when he didn't, I was surprised. So Spencer Horwitz is definitely a terrific option. It just, I think they seem to really like what Lucas brings from the pinch running and defensive replacement aspects. And I do kind of wonder if they, at the very least right now, with them still kind of, it almost feels like you're holding your breath sometimes with the health of both George Springer and Kevin Kiermaier. And if that's the case, then you probably want Lucas available, no pun intended, in a pinch to get in there, because, and maybe Spencer Horwitz can do those things as well. Maybe Otto Lopez can do those things as well, but they seem to give the 26th guy a lot of rope. I mean, remember last year, Bradley Zimmer was that guy. And I remember like there were people who would call into JSOC being like, why don't they give Nathan Lucas a shot? And it's true, they probably should have, but they didn't. And Bradley Zimmer stuck on the roster like basically the entire season, actually, is what it ended up being.
Yeah. I think there is something to be said. You make a really good point about that, just with the possibility of injuries in the outfield. To have a dude, and this is something that's probably not, Lucas probably isn't given enough credit for the fact that he can play all three outfield positions. Not everyone can do that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's probably more than anything something that the Blue Jays coaching staff, John Schneider and everyone else, just loves about him. Because the other thing is we know this club, and I'm sure most ball clubs are like this, but the Blue Jays in particular, because the three of us watch them so closely, they love the heck out of their positional versatility. Like, my God, they love guys who can do like 99% of the roles on the team, right? Kevin Biggio does virtually everything. He can play.
He
first,
has
he
a
can play
job
second.
because of it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's probably the only reason why he is still on the roster, or at the very least hasn't been traded. Whit Merrifield, we talked about him. He's a guy who can play multiple positions and has many times this. Like I've said many times, he deserves to be the everyday second baseman. He's not the everyday second baseman, but he is an everyday player because they just use him in a variety of roles when they want to give like Kiermaier a day off or Springer a day off or Varsho a day off. He's like 99% of the time the guy who's they're going to put him to the outfield. But I mean, Espinal can play multiple positions. Like apart from the stars, virtually, and even the guys in the outfield can play multiple positions as well. So I think that is likely one of the biggest things in Lucas's favor right now.
Sho, this has been a blast. We love talking baseball, and you have just been a gem with your time here. I do have one last question before we get to a couple listener questions. We know you got to get out of here, but just want to thank you very much for being so generous with your time here. I do want to talk the AL West quickly here. Okay. Are the Rangers for real? Are the Angels for real? Is anyone in the AL West for real? And at 18-18, the World Series champions, in your opinion, are they still the ones you have picked to win that division?
I had to look up the standings because I couldn't remember where everyone was. First of all, I honestly forgot that the Oakland Athletics were in the AL West for half a second because, like, my God, the Oakland Athletics are an absolutely like wretched team to watch. Honestly, I genuinely feel bad for Oakland fans now that they're moving to Vegas. I never want to experience that. So first of all, that's wild that they've only won 8 games. That might be like one of those like all-time futility records. But I know it's not what you're asking. But
you're right though.
I do think the Rangers are genuinely good, which is kind of wild because they signed Jake DeGrom, and I thought it was a great signing, but DeGrom might be the best pitcher of our generation to not be healthy, essentially, right? Like the other best pitchers of his generation are like the Kershaws and the Verlanders of the world, but DeGrom,
the workhorses,
and he is filthy. DeGrom is one of the filthiest pitchers I've ever seen with my own 2 eyes, and he is just unfortunately never healthy. And you know what? Without DeGrom for much of the season, pitching either well or getting injured, the Rangers are still going on right along. Right? They got Josh Young, who's doing a lot of great stuff. They have Robbie Grossman, who seems to have found a second career in Texas. Obviously,
Dane Dunning has,
virtually every player you thought might have taken a step back or just be like a cast-off piece has been good to great for Texas. So I would say definitely I do believe in the Rangers. I do not necessarily believe in the Los Angeles Angels. That they are right above or around 500, I think is frankly impressive considering that. You know that I'm sure you guys have seen the meme of like the tungsten arm O'Doyle thing, right? Like when it like the Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani do all these incredible things, and then the Angels still find ways to lose. It still happens every now and again, but I still genuinely think that we talking about relationships when we talk about Bo Bichette earlier. I do think the relationship between Shohei Ohtani and the Angels, not even front office, but the Angels ownership, is probably not where it should be for someone who is like just like the world's biggest baseball star. So something tells me that Shohei will probably be wearing a blue Los Angeles uniform come the trade deadline or something similar, at the very least come next year. But I'm not sure. I think the Angels are for real. The Astros, I will say, are just so injured right now. They just have injuries at every possible position. They just lost Luis Garcia. I think for the rest of the year, right? He has
Tommy
surgery.
John.
Oh, that is brutal. I hate seeing injuries. I don't care what team it's on. Injuries are just awful because I just love watching baseball. But Luis Garcia was one of the young, exciting pitchers in the game, and he's done for this season. They still have the Jose Urquides and the Framber Valdez's of the world, and Valdez is just absolutely filthy himself. So I think they'll probably be okay. They have that Hunter Brown kid as well. So I think they'll be okay. But it just kind of seems like the Astros feel lucky to just be treading water and being at or around 500. And then they get the Chas McCormicks and the Jose Altuve's back, and they'll probably be fine, honestly. We'll see the Astros in another World Series is what's going to happen.
Yeah, agreed. I feel the same way. We'll throw to Adam here. He's got a couple listener questions for you.
Okay, 2 to get to. First one, rapid fire. So rate on a scale from 1 to 10 your confidence in the following guys. I got 9 names to give you. So scale of 1 to 10, rapid fire. Jordan Romano.
I'm gonna say 8.
Alec Manoa.
Oh boy, like 7.
Bichette.
10. Hard 10.
Give it a 10.
Kevin Biggio.
Oh man, that's a tough one. I'm gonna say 5 for Biggio because I'm not sure if he's gonna be on the team by the end of the year.
Okay. Nate Pearson.
Ooh, I'm a big Nate guy, so I'm gonna say an 8 for Pearson.
Okay, you say Kikuchi.
Ooh, you know what? 9 for Kikuchi. Love what I'm
Nice.
seeing for Kikuchi. He's been a lot of fun to watch.
Awesome. Espinal.
Ooh, Espinal. I'm gonna say, what did I say for Biggio? I said 5. So
5.
I think I'll go 5 for SB as well.
Okay. George Springer.
Ooh, Springer. You know, I'm gonna go for an 8 for Springer because he has been hitting the crap out of the ball. It's just unfortunately been really unlucky for him. So I think the worm turns for Springer. So I'll say 8.
Okay, and lastly, John Schneider.
Ooh, John Schneider. You know what? I'll go with an 8 for Schneider as well to bring it full circle to our conversation off the top, because I really do think Schneid's, like you mentioned, Scott, the guy has not had a full year to prove what he's worth. I think there's some other extenuating circumstances for some of his decision-making process as well. So I do genuinely think, let's say he gets one more piece to supplement that bullpen, whether it is a minor leaguer or a trade piece, I think we might be thinking a little differently. Even if like Jimmy Garcia turns it around, we might be thinking a little differently about what Schneider brings.
Okay.
I love those rankings, by the way. Sho, you fit right in with our walk-off toxic positivity that we get accused of sometimes.
Yeah, giving Kevin Biggio a 5. Toxic positivity for sure. All right. Let's last one here and we'll let you go. From Shannon on the Patreon says, if playoffs started today, every wild card team is from the AL East. And none of them are the Yankees. So if playoffs were today, the Blue Jays would be going to Baltimore for a best of 3. Okay. So name your 3 starting pitchers in order.
In order, eh? Boy.
And then she also does put the asterisk, ignore rest days, because like Alec Manoa just pitched yesterday. So like,
I see
everybody gets their rest off, right? So it's everybody's fresh. But who's starting game 1, game 2, and game 3 for you?
So, like in an ideal scenario, if the postseason started today, basically,
based on how everybody's playing and your confidence in them,
there's like pretty much no way you can make the argument for Alec Manoa to be one of those 3 starters, right? Like that's right. That's like the unfortunate thing about what we've seen so far. Like it almost has to be let's say, Gausman and Bassett would be 1 and 2. And then it almost has to be like a stack of Barrios and Kikuchi for game 3. Like, not because I think Alec Manoa will like never turn it around, but if the question is like if tomorrow or later today we're getting to game 3, then I feel like there's no way you can make the argument for how he's looked, right? Like I suppose if you really wanted to be dicey, you could have like Manoa start the game and only go like 3 innings, and if that, but I don't know what's the point of that, right? So you might as well just give Barrios or Kikuchi. Is it too hot a take to say that I might just give Kikuchi the start? I might do it, honestly.
No,
I'm with you.
Right now, I'm with you, and hopefully, Sho, we have you back on in August, and we're laughing at how silly we were not to be including Alec Manoa. But I do hope right for now.
Scott, you mentioned your bold prediction was that Bo Bichette would be a league average shortstop. My bold prediction this year was that Kikuchi would be an all-star. So I think we are like quietly on track for it, because
we're nailing it, but like
just barely. So,
I love it.
Honestly, Sho, thank you so much for taking the time. We really enjoyed talking ball with you. Excited to have you back sometime, and all the best, man. Cheers.
Yeah. Hey, anytime you guys want, you have my number. Shoot me a text, and I'm happy to jump on.
Cheers.